The storm was relentless, hammering the land with torrential rain as Cale stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the abyss. His heart was as turbulent as the storm above him, his thoughts consumed with vengeance. For years he had waited for this moment, the moment to avenge the loss of his family, the one thing that had been torn from him in the dead of night. His grip tightened on the hilt of his sword, the cold steel a reminder of his purpose. Beneath him, the ocean crashed against the rocks, a powerful roar that seemed to echo his rage. "It ends tonight," Cale muttered under his breath, the wind carrying his words into the void. His eyes narrowed as he turned toward the distant mountain where his enemies had taken refuge. Tonight, everything would change. There was no room for mercy, no space for doubt. His vengeance was the only truth he would allow himself. It was time to face the ones who had stolen his future. The journey to the mountain was long and grueling, the storm never relenting as Cale made his way through the dense forest. The trees around him groaned under the weight of the relentless rain, their branches swaying like the arms of giants in the storm. His cloak was soaked through, but his resolve remained unbroken. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself was trying to pull him back, to make him question his mission. But Cale knew better. The path to vengeance was never meant to be easy. With every passing moment, the image of his family's murder flashed before his eyes, each face, each scream, a constant reminder of the blood he was destined to spill. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The mountain, his final destination, loomed closer, its dark silhouette cutting through the stormy sky. "I will make them pay," Cale whispered to himself, his voice lost in the howling wind. No matter the cost. As the hours passed, Cale pushed forward through the forest, his determination unwavering despite the brutal conditions. The mountain was now much closer, its towering peak cutting through the stormy sky like a jagged knife. The rain had soaked him to the bone, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, filled with the faces of those he had lost. His father, his mother, his sister. Each memory was a blade in his heart, driving him onward. He knew his enemies were close, their campfires would soon be within reach. Thought of confronting them brought a surge of energy through his weary body. "They will not escape," he muttered, his voice cold and steady. "I will make sure of it." The trees began to thin as he approached the foothills of the mountain, and Cale's pace quickened, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. His vengeance was within his grasp, and nothing would stop him now. As Cale reached the base of the mountain, the storm began to subside, the rain tapering off into a light drizzle. The trees had given way to jagged rocks and rough terrain, the path now steep and unforgiving. Cale's muscles ached from hours of travel, but his resolve only grew stronger with each passing step. He had come this far, and the thought of finally confronting his enemies filled him with an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread. The cold air stung his face as he began to climb, each movement calculated and deliberate. The sound of rushing water echoed from a nearby stream, but all Cale could hear was the pounding of his heart in his ears, growing louder with every step. At the summit, his enemies awaited. He could feel them, their presence just beyond the next ridge. Cale paused for a moment, gripping the hilt of his sword with both hands. He had no fear left, only the hunger for revenge. "This ends tonight," he whispered, his voice carrying in the stillness. At the peak of the mountain, Cale finally saw them, his enemies. The sight of their campfires flickering in the distance stirred something deep within him, a mixture of rage and anticipation. They had taken everything from him, and now they were within his reach. His grip tightened on the hilt of his sword, and a steady breath filled his lungs. Cale had trained for this moment, prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. As he crept closer, the camp came into view. A group of men gathered around a fire, laughing, unaware of the death that was closing in on them. Cale's eyes narrowed, the cold air biting at his skin. He could hear their voices, but he couldn't focus on anything but the revenge that would soon be his. "No more running," he muttered to himself. "No more hiding." The time had come for him to exact the price they owed. With a swift movement, He drew his sword and stepped forward, his presence now known. Cale moved silently through the shadows, his eyes locked on the group of men huddled around their campfire. They were still unaware of his presence. His heart beat in his chest like a drum, each thump matching the rhythm of his fury. He had come this far, pushed through every obstacle, and now the time for mercy was over. His enemies had destroyed his family, had taken away everything that had once mattered to him. As he approached, the firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the rocks. The men laughed and joked, their voices grating on Cale's nerves. Every word they spoke made his blood boil, but he held his ground. He needed to be patient. The element of surprise was his ally. "It's almost time," Cale muttered to himself, his breath steady but his hands trembling with anticipation. He was a step away from ending the lives of those who had stolen his future. And there would be no hesitation. With a sudden movement, Cale stood, his sword gleaming in the pale moonlight. His footsteps were silent, his body a shadow as he moved closer to the camp. The men, still oblivious to the danger, continued their conversation, unaware of the predator in their midst. Cale's mind raced with memories of the past, the faces of his family, the screams that still echoed in his mind. He couldn't afford to waste time. With a swift motion he launched himself into the camp, his sword cutting through the air. The first man barely had time to react before the blade sank deep into his chest. The camp erupted into chaos, the other men scrambling to defend themselves. But it was too late. Cale was upon them like a storm, his fury driving every move. "You took everything from me," he shouted, his voice low and guttural, filled with the raw emotion that had built up for years. The camp descended into chaos as Cale continued his relentless assault. The men, now scrambling to grab weapons, were no match for his speed and skill. His movements were fluid, calculated, each strike designed to incapacitate. But his mind wasn't on the fight, it was on the faces of the ones he had lost. Every man he brought down was one step closer to his ultimate goal. "You won't escape justice," Cale muttered under his breath, his voice cold and unwavering. The campfire sputtered, casting eerie shadows over the scene. The remaining men, now terrified, began to retreat, but Cale was already upon them. His sword moved like an extension of his own will, unrelenting, as the sound of steel clashing against steel rang through the night. There was no mercy in his heart, not for these men, not for anyone who had wronged him. With the last man lying at his feet, Cale paused, his chest heaving with exertion. The camp was silent now, save for the crackling fire and the distant sound of wind. He wiped the blood from his sword with the hem of his cloak, the cold air biting at his skin. It was over. The weight of the revenge he had sought for so long pressed down on him, but there was no satisfaction in it. Only emptiness. Cale glanced around at the bodies, the faces of the men who had taken everything from him now lifeless. He felt no triumph, only a hollow victory. "It's done," Cale whispered, his voice lost in the wind. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew his journey wasn't over. There was more to be done, more blood to spill. The road to redemption, to true peace, was still long and treacherous. But for now, at least he had avenged his family. Cale stood alone in the aftermath, the quiet night pressing in around him. The storm had passed, but the weight of his actions lingered in the air like a thick fog. His sword, now sheathed at his side, felt heavier than ever. He hadn't expected it to feel this way. He had prepared himself for the moment of retribution, had imagined the satisfaction of vengeance countless times, but now that it was over, all he felt was emptiness. The men he had slain had been part of a larger plan, one that had taken everything from him. But as their bodies lay scattered around the camp, Cale could not escape the nagging question, was this truly the end? The fire crackled softly in the background, its light casting eerie shadows across the battlefield. "It should have felt different," Cale muttered under his breath, his voice lost in the wind. There was no celebration, no sense of closure. Only a cold silence, a hollow victory. And now, he was left with the question of what came next. As Kale turned to leave the camp, his mind was clouded with doubt. He had accomplished what he set out to do, but the path ahead seemed unclear. He had avenged his family, but now what? The fire had burned bright in his heart for so long, fueling him with hatred, but now that the flames had died down, he was left with the cold, unsettling truth. Revenge had not healed his wounds. It had only deepened them. The road he had chosen was one of destruction, and Kale realized with a sinking feeling that it had consumed him more than he had ever anticipated. He thought of his family again, his father's face, his sister's laughter. Would they be proud of what he had done? He paused in his tracks, staring out into the distance. The mountain loomed ahead, its jagged peak now shrouded in mist. The question of what came next hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as Kale stood at a crossroads in his journey. Kale's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword, but the figure that emerged from the shadows was not an enemy. It was a woman. She was cloaked in dark fabric, her face partly hidden, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, met Kale's with a piercing intensity. "You've made quite a name for yourself," she said, her voice low but carrying an undeniable authority. "But revenge, Kale, is a fleeting satisfaction. It doesn't fill the void." Kale's hand remained on his sword, but he didn't draw it. His instincts told him to be wary, but there was something about the woman's presence that commanded respect. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his voice cold. The woman took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I know what you seek," she said. "But there is more to this than just revenge. The real battle has yet to begin." The woman's words echoed in Kale's mind as he followed her to a secluded area, away from the remnants of the camp. "The real battle," she had said. What did she mean? Kale's every instinct told him to be cautious, but there was something compelling about her. She spoke as if she knew the depths of his pain, as if she understood the weight of his vengeance. "You seek closure," she continued, her voice softer now, "but revenge is never enough. You have broken yourself trying to avenge what you lost, but there is a greater purpose waiting for you." Kale's eyes narrowed. "What are you offering?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was knowing. A path that leads beyond revenge. A chance to not only right the wrongs done to you, but to wield power in a way you've never imagined. The choice is yours, Kale. You can continue down this path, or you can follow me and change the fate of your world. Kale stood in the moonlit clearing, facing the mysterious woman who had offered him a path beyond revenge. His thoughts were a whirlwind. Could he trust her? Was there really more to his quest than bloodshed and vengeance? The idea of leaving everything behind, of abandoning the quest that had consumed him for years, was unfathomable. Yet, there was something in her words that rang true. His soul felt shattered, and the emptiness that remained gnawed at him. "I have nothing left but this," Kale said, his voice laced with frustration. "My vengeance is all that keeps me going." The woman's expression softened, though her eyes remained sharp. "That's the lie you've told yourself, Kale. Revenge has driven you, but it hasn't healed you. It's consumed you, and now it's time to see the truth." Kale's gaze faltered, and he took a step back. The choice she was offering him felt impossible, but her presence was undeniable. "If I follow you, what will I become?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman's gaze softened as she stepped closer to Kale, her voice steady and full of conviction. "You will not become something you are not," she said. "You will become who you were always meant to be. The choice is not about giving up your vengeance. It's about wielding the power to bring true change to the world, to control your fate instead of being enslaved by it." Kale hesitated, the temptation of her words pulling at him like a magnet. He had spent years letting his anger and pain define him, and the thought of finally being free from that weight stirred something deep inside him. But doubt still lingered. "And what if I fail?" Kale asked, his voice full of uncertainty. The woman smiled faintly. "The fear of failure is what keeps you chained to your past, Kale. You must choose to walk a new path. One that will test you, yes, but also empower you. Do not fear what you could become. Kale looked into her eyes, searching for any trace of deception. He found none. With a heavy sigh he nodded. Then show me. The woman led Kale through the dense forest, her pace steady and unwavering as Kale followed, his thoughts still swirling. The deeper they went into the forest, the heavier the air seemed to grow, filled with an ancient energy that Kale could feel prickling at his skin. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. "Where are we going?" Kale asked, his voice tinged with curiosity and apprehension. The woman glanced back, her eyes gleaming with knowledge. "We are going to the heart of the world," she said simply. "It is where the true power of your revenge lies, but also where the path to your future begins. There, you will learn how to harness the energy that courses through everything." Kale felt a surge of excitement mixed with fear. Could this place truly give him the power to change everything? Or was this just another step on the road to more destruction? "I'm ready," Kale muttered, though doubt lingered in his mind. After what felt like hours of walking, they arrived at a hidden clearing, surrounded by towering ancient trees. The air here was thick with power, the very earth beneath Kale's feet vibrating with energy. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone circle, ancient runes etched into its surface, glowing with a faint blue light. The woman stopped and turned to face him. "This is the heart of the world," she said. "Here, you will find the source of the power that can change everything. But you must prove yourself worthy." Kale stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The runes seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He could feel the energy surrounding him, calling to him, urging him to take the final step. "How do I prove myself?" Kale asked, his voice filled with urgency. The woman smiled faintly. "You must face your greatest fear and embrace the truth of who you are." Kale stepped cautiously into the stone circle, feeling the strange energy pulse around him like a living thing. His heart raced as the ground beneath his feet vibrated slightly, resonating with an unseen force. The woman's voice broke the silence. "To prove yourself, you must confront your past. Only then will the power reveal itself to you." Kale's breath caught in his throat, as memories of his family flooded his mind, his father's face, his mother's smile, and the sound of his sister's laughter. All so vivid, so real. The pain of their loss came crashing back over him like a tidal wave. He dropped to his knees, his hands clutching his head as the guilt and rage overtook him. "I couldn't save them," Kale whispered, his voice breaking. The woman's voice was softer now, full of empathy. "It wasn't your fault, Kale, but you must let go of the chains that bind you to your past. Only then can you move forward." Kale looked up, his face streaked with tears, but there was a spark in his eyes. "I will not be defined by my pain anymore. I will find the strength to move on." The blue glow from the runes intensified as Kale rose to his feet, a sense of clarity beginning to form in his mind. The memories of his family still lingered, but now they seemed distant, like shadows on the edge of his consciousness. He had felt their loss, but he no longer needed to be consumed by it. "I am not my grief," Kale said, his voice strong and clear. The woman nodded, a slight smile forming on her lips. "Good," she said softly. "Now, you must embrace the power that comes with this acceptance." The ground beneath them trembled as Kale extended his arms, feeling the energy of the heart of the world surge through him. He closed his eyes and focused, allowing the power to fill every part of his being. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, pure, raw, and limitless. For the first time, Kale felt as if he was truly in control of his destiny. "I am ready," he whispered, his voice resonating with newfound strength. The power Kale had unlocked surged through him, filling every part of his body. He felt stronger, more alive than he ever had before. The woman's voice echoed in his mind, steady and guiding. "This power is yours to wield, Kale. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. You must not lose sight of what is important." Kale nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. For a moment he had felt invincible, but the woman's caution brought him back to reality. "I understand," Kale said, his voice steady. I will not let this power consume me. The woman stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. The world is on the brink of change, Kale. The choices you make from here on will shape the future. Kale took a deep breath, his heart now calm and resolute. I am ready for whatever comes next. The power Kale had unlocked still hummed in the air as the woman led him away from the heart of the world. The forest around them seemed to part as they moved, as if the very land itself recognized Kale's transformation. The heart has chosen you, Kale, she said, her voice softer now, filled with a deep respect. But this is only the beginning. The path ahead is fraught with dangers, and you will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine. Kale nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. He had accepted the power, but now the real test would begin. The woman turned to face him, her eyes sharp. There are those who will seek to stop you, Kale. They will try to take what is yours. You must be prepared to fight for what you've gained. Kale's jaw tightened. I'm ready. I won't back down. The woman's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Then follow me. The first step is to confront those who would oppose you. Kale and the woman traveled for days, pushing through thick forests, rugged terrain, and steep hills. The further they ventured, the more Kale felt the weight of the power coursing through him. It was intoxicating, and yet there was a persistent nagging in the back of his mind. The woman had warned him. With power came responsibility, but was he truly ready to carry that burden? He had lost his family, and vengeance had been his driving force for so long. But now, with this new power, what would he become? Would he be any different from the men he had slain? Kale glanced at the woman, who seemed unbothered by the harsh journey. She was always calm, always focused, her eyes watching him carefully. What's next? Kale asked, his voice steady but filled with questions. The woman didn't answer immediately, her expression unreadable. She finally spoke, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. You must confront those who seek to stop you. They are closer than you think. As they approached a clearing, Kale felt a shift in the air. The trees seemed to hold their breath, and the wind grew still. The woman stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the area. They're here, she said, her voice low and firm. Kale's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, his body tensing. The power within him surged, a reminder of his strength, but also of the danger he now faced. Who are they? Kale asked, his voice filled with urgency. The woman turned to face him, her expression intense. The Keepers, she said simply. They are the ones who will try to control the power you've unlocked. They are not to be underestimated. Kale's grip tightened on his sword, the weight of her words settling into him. The Keepers. They were the next challenge in his path, and he had no intention of backing down. I'll fight them, Kale said, his voice resolute. They won't stop me. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Kale's instincts kicked in, and before he could fully process, he was already moving, his sword drawn and ready. The woman stepped aside, allowing Kale to take the lead. Stay focused, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. They will try to confuse you, to overwhelm you. Don't let them. Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the trees. Figures began to emerge, cloaked in shadows, their movements fluid and deliberate. The Keepers were here. Kale's heart raced, but he could feel the power inside him rising to meet the challenge. He was ready. As the first Keeper stepped into the light, Kale's gaze locked onto him, his mind clear. Come, Kale muttered, his voice a low growl. Let's finish this. The first Keeper lunged, his movements swift and precise, but Kale was faster. His sword met the Keepers in a flash of steel, the clash of their blades ringing out in the quiet night. Kale's movements were fluid, controlled, but his opponent was skilled, his strikes calculated. The battle unfolded in a blur of motion, the sound of clashing steel filling the air. Kale's body moved almost instinctively, his every strike guided by the power within him. But the Keepers were relentless, their attacks coming from all sides. The woman remained calm, her eyes scanning the battlefield, waiting for the right moment to strike. Kale fought with everything he had, the energy within him fueling his every move. "Nah. Is this all you have?" Kale shouted, his voice full of fury. "I will not be stopped." The keeper's eyes glinted with menace, but Kale had already made up his mind. He would win, no matter the cost. With a final decisive blow, Kale struck down the first keeper, his sword sinking into the man's chest with a sickening thud. The keeper crumpled to the ground, his body lifeless. Kale stepped back, his breath heavy, his heart still racing. The other keepers hesitated for a moment, their expressions full of surprise. "You're not invincible," one of them said, his voice filled with venom. "You will fall like the others." Kale's eyes narrowed as he wiped the blood from his blade. "Not today," he said firmly. The remaining keepers regrouped, preparing to charge, but Kale's newfound power surged through him, his movements faster and more precise. He knew that this battle wasn't just about skill, it was about the strength of his resolve. With a roar, Kale charged forward again, ready to finish what he had started. The keepers would not win. Not this time. The keepers were in disarray. Kale's blade had already claimed several of their number, and the remaining few hesitated, their fear palpable. They had underestimated him. The power he had unlocked in the heart of the world surged through him, making his every movement feel effortless, yet filled with overwhelming strength. His enemies were skilled, but Kale was unstoppable. His mind was clear, the vengeance that had driven him for so long, now tempered with the wisdom of the woman's words. "You thought you could control me," Kale said, his voice cold and full of contempt. "But I control my own destiny now." The remaining keepers glared at him, but there was hesitation in their eyes. Kale could feel the weight of their fear, and it only fueled his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for his future, for his freedom. "You will not have it," Kale said, his sword raised high. "Not while I breathe." The keepers, realizing the battle was lost, began to retreat into the shadows, their movements quick and deliberate. But Kale was faster. With a roar, he charged forward, his sword flashing in the dim light. His power felt limitless, and he wasn't about to let them escape. The woman had taught him that this was about more than just vengeance. It was about control, about taking back what had been stolen from him. As the keepers scrambled, Kale's blade struck with deadly precision. One by one, they fell. The last keeper, a tall figure cloaked in dark robes, attempted to flee, but Kale was already upon him. "You're not going anywhere," Kale said, his voice low and filled with finality. With a swift motion, Kale's sword cut through the air, and the last keeper fell to the ground, lifeless. The battle was over. With the last of the keepers defeated, the forest fell silent, save for the distant sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Kale stood in the middle of the clearing, his chest heaving with exertion, his sword dripping with the blood of his enemies. The power inside him still surged, but it felt different now, more controlled, more focused. His heart no longer burned with the same fury that had driven him to this point. The woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable as she surveyed the battlefield. "You've proven yourself, Kale," she said, her voice calm. "But this is not the end. It is only the beginning." Kale wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" he asked. The woman's eyes gleamed with understanding. "The keepers were only a small part of the bigger picture. There are others who will come for you, Kale. Others who will seek to control the power you've unlocked." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then I'll stop them too." Kale's journey had come full circle. He had avenged his family, defeated the keepers, and unlocked a power that few could even comprehend. But the road ahead was far from clear. The woman had warned him, there were others who would seek to control him, to harness the very power he had claimed. "What now?" Kale asked, his voice filled with both exhaustion and anticipation. The woman turned to face him, her expression serious. "Now, you must learn to control the power within you. The world is full of those who would use it for their own gain. But you, Kale, are different. You can use it to change everything, to reshape the world according to your will." Kale's heart raced at the possibility, but doubt lingered. And if I can't control it? The woman placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes meeting his with an unwavering certainty. Then you will lose yourself, Kale. But if you can, you will become the most powerful force the world has ever known. Kale looked toward the horizon, the mountains in the distance standing tall and silent. His journey had taken him further than he ever expected, but it wasn't over. The woman had spoken of a greater purpose, of a world that could be reshaped. But Kale wasn't sure he was ready for that responsibility. I don't know if I can do this, Kale confessed, his voice low. The woman stood beside him, her presence steady and unyielding. You don't have to do it alone, she said. You are not meant to walk this path by yourself. You have the strength to change the world, Kale, but you must learn to trust those who stand with you. Kale turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was his to shape. Then I will trust, Kale said, his voice filled with resolve. And I will fight for a future worth living.